You are listening to the Bravo Creative Podcast, hosted by Tom Baker. Thank you for listening. Your position has been triangulated. Drone army has been dispatched to your location. Commencing attack run in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the Bravo Creative Podcast. I am so very happy that you're listening today. I've got a great guest for you today, and we have some very interesting things to discuss. But first, let's get some of this housekeeping out of the way. The Bravo Creative Podcast is being brought to you by way of Podbean, my weapon of choice, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Prime Music, YouTube, and the Facebook. And if you like what you're hearing, like and subscribe, and maybe drop me a message. I always love hearing from my audience. And you can always go out to the Bravo Creative website at www.bravocreative.net/Bravo Podcast. And it's linked out there directly. As of today, the Bravo Creative Podcast has over 1,300 listens, and that makes me so very happy. Thank you so very much for sticking with me. I've got some great guests coming up, and we're going to be talking about some exciting things in the coming weeks. Today's podcast is brought to you by my old favorite, practice, practice, practice. And I've been doing a lot of it lately. And just the sheer act of getting out there and fine-tuning those already beloved processes has made my mind explode in ideas. And not all of them are good, but it has been an awesome process. And maybe it's just spring and I'm all aflutter, but I've been out with the camera, I've been doing some photography, testing lenses, writing scripts and treatments, and organizing my office, and I'm working on a couple of events that I hope to be able to get out of my head and onto paper and out into the ether. And more on that soon, but not just yet. My guest today, I met him at the Ozark Mountain Web Fest a couple years ago, and I was really impressed with his journey in filmmaking and visual effects. And his name has come up a few times on the podcast, and he has a very impressive IMDb page that I will include in the show links. And once you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And this episode is a little different. I was on the road again, and I got all the gear set up. I got the microphones powered up and the headphones plugged in, and we just kind of immediately started talking. So there was no recorded intro. We just got down to business. My guest is very talented. He has an awesome office and an even awesomer resume of work. The legendary Darrell Claunch.
Having listened to Sam and you guys talk last week about how early on you guys got to start playing with video cameras and that sort of thing. I didn't touch one till late in high school. And so it was I started into it thinking about animation, so then I could do everything without a camera or crew or whatever. I could just
So you were looking at it from the idea that you didn't have the camera as a tool, so you started looking at other means
of getting the story
to be
out.
able to get the story out.
Yeah.
So what was your tool then that you had at that time?
Oh, man. I think it was my junior year in high school. My parents had a computer built, and at the time, the dude was like, "This is the biggest computer I've ever seen, and it could take over the world." And it was probably 32 megabytes or something. This was 96. So, and I had a Wacom tablet, but everything was still pixel based. I don't even know if Photoshop was around.
It was bitmap.
Yeah.
It was all bitmap.
Yeah. So I'm learning how to draw with pixels and that sort of stuff. But I've always been an animation nerd and just a movie nerd in general, but yeah, so I knew the principles of drawing animation, and I had tried, I always do the flip books and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just, at the time, I didn't consider really having all of the things you needed. Because, again, I grew up out in the middle of nowhere, and so all the Hollywood stuff seemed like such a, just not even a possibility.
unattainable.
Yeah. And so it wasn't even something to consider. And so it was just like, well, this is how I do comic books and stuff like that. And, you know, but then I volunteered to be the women's basketball coach or assistant coach, he didn't do anything except for he ran the camera at the games. And I volunteered just so I could play with the video camera. And it's like the second game, the coach had a talk with me because I was zooming in and trying to get like decent shots on all the players and stuff. He's like, no, I just want to see the whole court the whole time. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. So, but that was me first getting to play with the camcorder. And then I came to MSU because they had the best animation program in the state. And it just happened that like they also had all the film classes and stuff as well. So then
So you went into all that then?
Yeah.
Okay. And what type of so your first exposure to a camera was like a VHS camera?
Yeah, some crappy big giant thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, like that early influence for you, because that obviously had to be pretty strong. Just, you know, like you said earlier, being a starving artist, there has to be an urge that gets you so jazzed about doing that stuff when you know that the consequence is zero pay,
right?
and not necessarily zero pay, but not a consistent, you know, idea of when the next paycheck is coming.
And that wasn't something that was really ever like. I think I was like on the cusp of that generation where it was like, if you got a degree, you were going to make money. Like that was just kind of how it was pitched. And I had no clue about like how the production stuff worked really anyway. But, I mean, growing up, like bonding time with my dad was always watching movies and stuff like that. And, I had a really good memory for all of that stuff. And so it was like, I remember like getting really excited when I recognized Geordie LaForge off of Star Trek: The Next Generation as the dude from Reading Rainbow, and like starting like building that mental network of like, these are people like kind of out there and stuff. And I just I like the storytelling and that kind of epicness of it. And
so what would be probably like, if you could go back and you could look at like those that one film that's that early influence, that thing that kind of jazzed you up, which one kind of pops out at you?
Oh, it would probably be Ghostbusters or Ninja Turtles, like the 1990.
What is it about Ninja Turtles?
movie.
That was like this one that I've heard multiple people tell me that Ninja Turtles, the Jim Henson one, the original, was a huge influence on them.
Well, I mean, I had a bunch of the toys, but it was one of those things where you see it as a cartoon, like that was your deal. And then, I mean, Jim Henson is just amazing. And so, and he made them look real, like just everything about that movie. So the fact that it was something that was a cartoon and completely imaginary was so realistic. It wasn't even like a lot of the kids' movies where it's all like happy, shiny.
Right.
It was gritty. It was New York City sewers and stuff like that. And so it was just like being able to see it kind of not necessarily evolve, but see what was possible from one medium to the next.
Right.
Like that was huge. And the animatronics and stuff they do with the masks, it was...
I kind of missed Ninja Turtles. So like whenever, I think it came out in what, 92, 93?
87 was when the cartoon started, but then the movie was 90.
The movie was 90?
Yeah, and that probably hit its peak right around 90.
See, I was like a junior in high school then.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was
the cool kid stuff.
I was past that. I was watching, you know, like, I think, like Young Guns, you know, like the rebirth of the Western, you know, Young Guns and Unforgiven and all that
Quick
stuff.
and the Dead and
yeah,
all that
that
stuff.
all came out then. And I was really into that stuff. But there's another group out there that got into like that translation from cartoon into live action. And it really did affect you guys, because that movie has come up more than once just by talking with people. It was like Ninja Turtles. David Watson, that was one that he talked about, was Ninja Turtles. I was like, wow, that's crazy. I wouldn't see that, but hey, that's cool.
Yeah,
And I just introduced the kids to Ghostbusters the other day.
I like our girls are 2 weeks from being 5 and then 6, so they're kind of on the younger side of it, but they've seen clips.
They won't catch the dirty jokes at all.
No. I'm more worried about like the librarian scare at the beginning and that sort of thing. But that's just, you can see my office here in a little bit. I've surrounded it with like 80s nostalgia stuff.
Oh, nice.
And so they know Ghostbusters and Gremlins and all that stuff in there. And so they've asked to see clips, but I've been very careful to curate how much of it they actually see. But I'm so stoked to get to show them all that stuff.
The beginning library sequence in Ghostbusters, if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. It's like the first, 10 minutes of the film. It's the intro and it's the kind of the lead up to everything. That is one of my favorite. And just watching it the other day, I was like, it's so tight. They did such a good job building each one of those characters really quick and setting up the kind of the conflict for the film. They did a really, really, really good job in that.
Yeah.
And I still love it.
It balances horror and comedy so well.
It does.
I mean, and it's definitely one of the tighter scripts, which is kind of impressive considering like how much improv those guys all came from. It's every single year if the Alamo plays it, I'll go see it on the big screen there just to see it in a room full of fans. And like as a VFX kid now, on the big screen, I can see like some errors and stuff that I would have never caught on TV.
You can definitely see like when Slimer's coming down the hall. You can definitely see I guess what they call that, the mat where they were cutting it out.
Yeah,
you can definitely see that now.
Yeah,
which I guess they could go back and fix that easy enough.
Oh yeah, they could, but I mean, and it's one of the dangers, but kind of positive things of all of the remastering and stuff like that is some of this stuff was very intentionally only meant to be seen like standard definition. Yeah, so it's one of those things.
Well, in Ashley has one of my favorite lines, too, is when Dan Aykroyd comes down the steps and he says, "Listen, do you smell something?"
Yeah.
And it's like, my kids, they totally missed it. I'm like, no, wait, let's rewind it. Listen, this is one of my favorite lines in the film because he delivered it perfectly.
Yeah.
So, and I know that we just kind of started the podcast. But I thought conversation was good enough. I'll just hit record, you know. But, so if you go out and look on your IMDb, all right, I noticed that you have Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Was that because of a remaster?
Yeah.
It was?
Yeah, it's. I had a cousin actually ask me about that. And he's like, "You have Jurassic Park on your IMDb. Weren't you like 9?" And, if you actually click on it, it says stereoscopic remaster, 3D, something like that.
And you have that on quite a few films.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the studios I worked at out there. They did some visual effects stuff, but they also did stereoscopic conversion, which is when you go see a movie in 3D. Like most of them don't shoot it in 3D. They deliver it to places like that, and then we have to create the other eye. And whenever you do that, you have like stuff that you can see around that you couldn't see before because you only had the one eye. But it's just like they'll put your finger up to your nose, camera 1, camera 2. You like what you can see. And so part of our job was recreating the stuff that's behind the things. And sometimes that was like a couple pixels, and sometimes that was like 60 or 70, depending on how close some of that stuff was. And
so is it a clone tool, or are you going back through and like redrawing it?
Yes. Like sometimes you get away with the clone tool, but like I'm really good at removals and clean plating now because of having to rebuild so many backgrounds on so many different movies. But it's like the main thing I took away from that is you can really tell like a solid a DP, a director of photography, like the ones that put and know what they're doing with cinematography. And like because one of them we worked on was like G.I. Joe Retaliation, like the second of the reboots. And it would be like Bruce Willis and The Rock on a plain blue wall, like no depth to it. Like But then when we did the remaster for Jurassic Park, and that was because they were coming out with Jurassic World, and so they're using it kind of as a promo tool. Like, of course, they want it to be pixel perfect, but I mean, it was beautiful. Like the depth and stuff that was in every single one of those shots, no matter how much of a throwaway shot it was.
Right.
Was just amazing.
Every frame was a picture.
Painting. Yeah, it was beautiful. And I kind like Jurassic Park's one of my favorite movies of all time. Like that would definitely be another one where visual effects was big influence on me getting into what I was doing now. So there was definitely some reverence to all this stuff. And whenever they do that, they also have you go through and remove mistakes. Like, oh, you can actually see the crew in the background watching a screen. Remove that. And that was like in one of the opening scenes with the raptor in the cage. You could see crew guys in the back, and they had Jurassic Park hard hats on, so they'd blend.
Right.
But once you noticed them, you couldn't unsee the fact that they're sitting there staring at a monitor. And so like that stuff would get removed. And I had the helicopter shot where they first land in the helicopter, and there's a waterfall behind them, and Hammonds and all of them get out of there. And I redid that one, and there's a water droplet that like lands on the camera about halfway through, and they had me remove that water droplet from the whole shot. And I was like, I understand, but that water droplet's kind of been there for 15 years. Yeah, maybe we should leave it alone.
And people look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, that little realism.
Yeah, it adds it grounds it in a way. Yeah,
exactly.
And now they add blood spurts onto the lens.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, so when you talk about like going back, because you were talking about G.I. Joe Retaliation, do you feel? I was thinking about this the other day because I was watching a Roger Deakins documentary, or one of the things that some of his films, and you notice nowadays that everybody talks about cinema as being like this really shallow depth of field and just knocks everything out in the background. They're like, oh, put it at 1.5 and let's just see how blurry we can get the background. But Deakins doesn't really shoot. He shoots like f8.
Yeah.
He's trying to shoot higher than that. Do you notice that when you've gone back and looked at some of these films, when you've gone back and
for sure.
fixed them?
Yeah.
There is a happy medium. It's not all the way to it's just like a Photoshop slider. You never go all the way to 100 on a Photoshop slider.
Yeah.
You're always going like in the decimals to make changes. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like what you found out over the course of, because you've had to probably do some really deep dives into how they filmed these things.
Oh, for sure. One of the ones that we worked on was Star Trek Into Darkness. Like came out in 2013, 14. Which again, I'm a nerd, so I was excited to work on it.
That was the sequel.
Yeah, that was a sequel to the reboot.
To the reboot.
Yeah, there's one with Khan in it. Benedict Cumberbatch just eating up the scenery. But like one of our jobs was erasing or adding in lens flares to make it more like exactly what JJ wanted.
Right.
Which, I mean, I guess is a talent I now have, but it's one of those things. I mean, it all comes down to the confidence, I think, of the people making the movie, whether the director, the cinematographer, whatever. Because like, a lot of the Westerns and stuff back in the day, like the whole point was you saw everything. But again, you kind of talking about like that shallow depth of field where it's like a face and just bokeh, all behind it. Sometimes that feels more like a crutch. Like they didn't know they just wanted something that was really pretty that they could throw up on Instagram. And maybe it's the Instagram mindset where you're thinking more of like, this will look really good as a still than how it actually translates into this narrative of the thing. But yeah, you tell really quickly like who was in it to make a paycheck and who was in it because they had something that they really just knew what they wanted. And you can complain about it because at the time it's kind of obnoxious, but again, it's nice. It's nice whenever the director knows what he wants. Like I've worked with some guys where I've like, what's your color palette? What's your theme? Like trying to understand. And like, I don't know, just throw something at me. We'll see. I'm like, so okay, cool guy.
But do you feel that is, do you feel that a color palette is essential in that filmmaking process?
Well, it's basically me as an art kid trying to find like their thought process. And usually I can tell like, again, how much thought they've put into it and how much back and forth there'll end up being based on if I can ask if it's even like, what movie does this feel like to you? Like, what other movie should I be looking at, or what posters, or
right,
whatever. But like, we worked on that TV show Legion, which I think it was FX or something like that. But we did a couple of seasons, and that was one where like we were putting takes together. Where like he liked the actor's job in take one, but not actor two's take, and so we take two different takes together for one shot to get exactly.
So you'd cut one person out of the one and put them on the other,
or just shift their timing by like 20 frames.
It's kind of a George Lucas concept, isn't it?
From for sure. I mean, the control levels that you can get in this kind of digital age, but I mean, those guys do exactly what they wanted. You throw any question at them, and they knew their answer down to the pixel. And again, it kind of feels annoying, but then again, it's also really nice because they've put 100% into it.
They've really thought it through, to the minutia.
And they're not just there to throw another episode out and move on to the next big show.
Right. Wow.
So, yeah.
So have you worked on like a project? And like I said, and I'm going to post your IMDb out there, because there is a ton you have a huge list of films that you've worked on, and you're working on right now currently. Yeah. And the thing is amazing about it is that on some of those, and I actually the first time I met you, which was down at the Ozark Mountain Web Fest.
Yeah.
And you were talking about what's the show with Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson?
Highwaymen. The cops that caught Bonnie and Clyde back.
Which I love. I love that show.
It was such a good movie.
It was a really good movie. But you talked about a point in there where you had to remove, like, there was a sound guy, right, in the frame, and you just had to like take him out of it.
Yeah, and that happens a lot.
The question I have is, have the sets because they have such a fast turnaround on films, they kind of don't even mess with some things anymore. What do you think? What do you think some of that is?
Kind of, and I think they've gotten so used to being able to fix it in post that I don't want to say careless, but yeah, they definitely don't check the sides as much, or they just don't bother with the fixes. Like, there's a ton of.
So what's the first AD doing, basically?
Well, yeah, I mean, like there was it was about a month and a half ago. I was finishing up one of the last shots I had on a series that's coming on Netflix called Halston. It's the fashion designer from like the 60s that was big. But anyway, there was one shot of like a beach home, and they were asking me to remove like XYZ, but there was literally like a whole truck's worth of grip gear over on the right side of the screen. And I was like, they want me to remove that too, right? Oh, yeah. But I was like, obviously that was seen there. And it was just like, well, we need to get this shot, and that's going to take too long to move all that. So we'll just fix it in post. Yeah, just go ahead and shoot it.
And just as a point of reference, like, how much does that typically cost to remove? You're shooting at 24 frames per second.
Yeah, usually.
You've got to remove that out of every frame, right?
Yeah.
So there's no program that you can click. Well, I did see that there is a new program that you can go in and make a little bit of an adjustment, and it'll do it kind of.
That's the problem with any sort of that proprietary stuff. Like, Adobe's got their autofill feature where it's like, you just rotated this guy out on the beach and it's completely clean. And I've myself and several other artists that I know of will try that on some shots that look like they're right out of the demo, and it does not work.
It doesn't.
Like that. But I mean,
that's good to know, because I hate Premiere, and
I mean, After Effects is one of my main programs. I've used it 20 years, and that demo does not happen that clean. Work. No, I mean, you set up keyframes just like anything, and it'll help you kind of get from point A to point B, but it's frame by frame. Sometimes, I mean, you're tracking stuff in. There's no just, I circle this area and the computer does everything that I need sort of function. So, and price range is kind of hard to tell, because one of the common phrases is the easiest way to become a millionaire in the visual effects industry is to start off as a billionaire, because it's constantly undercutting each other, and they ship stuff overseas. And I had one guy that he was production at one of the bigger VFX houses, and so the first thing to do is to figure out how much it's going to cost and then how much profit they'd like to see, and then immediately cut 30% off just to become competitive with everything else. So
the VFX houses are doing that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Just because, the studios are constantly looking for ways to help, their bottom line and get more money back into the CEOs and stuff like that. And there's no unions in the visual effects industry, so there's nobody to fight and say, you have to pay everybody this, you have to do this many hours and whatnot. And so it's like, if you work in the visual effects industry, you expect 10-hour days, 6 days a week, and again, one of those things that I didn't realize till I got into it was like how feast or famine it is. It's like you'll work 3 months super hard, and then you'll spend 3 months looking for work, and so you just kind of learn how to float all that.
So that kind of brings up a question, so when you first got into it, like that first big job, where all of a sudden you look at it and go, all right, I made it.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
I don't know if I
or has it happened?
That was one of the deals. My wife and we moved out to LA in 2011 because she wanted to act and I wanted to be behind the screen and behind the camera, and I didn't care how. I was willing to just be a PA, whatever. But I had worked at a TV station as a creative director, so I had some management on there and a reel, and I had edited commercials and stuff like that. And then I spent 3 years at a video game studio doing kids games for Nintendo DS, like Dora the Explorer and Diego, and the last several was Sesame Street. And I had done compositing and stuff for my degree, so I knew what it was, but that wasn't why. I just wanted to go out and work in movies, and that's why. So we moved out there, and I didn't realize that the summer was dead. They just don't do production really on as far as the VFX side during the summer.
Really? So it's like the down season then.
Yeah. There's if you have work during the summer, you're doing awesome, because that's all your main shows are wrapped up, and so they're getting in all their indie movies and stuff like that during the summer, so it just hasn't hit the post houses yet.
Oh wow.
So I got out there and I throwing resumes at everybody, and found a job fair that had a couple game studios that I knew of and liked, and Disney Animation was there. So I'm like, man, I'll just show up, why not? And so I put on my suit and printed out 40 resumes and went there, and turns out it was a visual effects job fair. And I went and talked to the game studios, and they were both like, yeah, we're not hiring. We'd already paid for the booth. And I was like, cool. And I went to the Disney Animation thing, and they're like, did you sign up on our website? I'm like, yeah. Okay, cool. Here's a notepad and some pencils. I'm like, okay. And so I was like, I'm here in a suit, got a stack full of resumes. And so I just went to every single other booth in the whole place and talked to everybody. And there was one booth, it was Look Effects, and the dude that I talked to seemed like he barely paid any attention to me. Always looking off other places, but they worked on Limitless and Black Swan, that just come out.
Oh yeah.
And those are both, I just loved them both. And so I talked to him quite a bit. And then this was the 1st of June, and I didn't hear anything for months. And then that's when I found out, they don't work basically from May 20th to August 20th.
So they were just banking up people.
Yeah. They just ready for whenever, because when they start, they're ready to roll, And so mid-August, it was literally 2 weeks from moving back.
And I guess
Missouri.
they're not going to pay you if you're not working.
Because
so,
we're all freelancers.
Yeah.
We're all contractors.
Okay.
So he calls me up, and as I'm already well, I guess we're going home. And he calls me up, and he says, "You're the guy with the beard and the suit, right?" I'm like, yeah, because that was, I'm sure it is with other aspects of the filmmaking industry, but as creatives in general, it's very casual. So everybody at this job fair was wearing T-shirts and jeans and hoodies, except for me and one other dude. And then there was 150, 200 people walking around. And it's me and this other guy, both in suits, we lock eyes across the room and just give a nod to each other and go. But that was one thing that helped him remember me, was I was the dude with the beard and the suit.
It is that heartland work ethic.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
And that's, And he's called me. He's like, he asked me to come in, and he looks at my resume. He's like, yeah, I saw you had Sesame Street on your resume. I'm like, well, yeah, but that was video game stuff. He's like, Muppets. I'm like, yes, sir. Okay. And he didn't ask to see my demo reel or anything. It was just from talking to me. He's like, I got a good feeling about you. And I expected to be like cleaning up coffee spills and just kind of learning. And he's like, no, we're going to throw you on a box. You're starting tomorrow. And it was the Muppet movie that came out in 2011. Really? And so that was like my first visual effects thing. And I was learning a new program. I was learning Nuke.
Yeah.
And he
so you never messed with that then?
No, it's too expensive. And I, like the school had always done After Effects, and the studios that I'd worked at here in town had always done After Effects.
Now explain for the audience what Nuke is, because it's just a render engine, correct?
No, Nuke's as a visual effects program. Difference between After Effects, everything's in layers, and you have to put effects in each one. Nuke is node based, so it's basically
like Blackmagic or DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah. You set up, you put an effect in there, and then you link it to other things, and it all reacts together. So similar concept, but completely different user interface. But yeah, so that was it. That was my first thing was the Muppet movie, and then which again, I didn't realize at the time, like how short contracts usually were. I was talking to a dude that he's like, I've been in the industry for like 3 years. And then he was talking about all the different studios he'd worked at. I'm like, how have you worked at 14 studios in 3 years? And just realized that like half the time, if they don't have another movie coming right up, they lay everybody off and then hire people back, for the next movie. And I just lucked out that they had like solid work for 10 months. And so I went from the Muppets to like one of the Underworld movies. And and they were like the official VFX vendor for Bones, the TV series. And so they had consistent work for 10 months. So I could kind of get money after not having worked for like a year, and then, and just kind of get into it and have a decent resume. And again, I learned Nuke. And so then after that, it was basically every summer in LA, I figured I may get 2 weeks of work at some point, and then I'd pick up, you get really busy from like Thanksgiving to Christmas. And then everything shuts down from like December 15th to January 15th. So you might as well come home and spend a month with the fam. And then everything picks back up January to mid-May.
Did you like that lifestyle?
The having those big chunks of time, or just living in California?
Yeah, all of it.
Oh, I did not like having big chunks. I don't idle well. I like having stuff to work on all the time. And I definitely, living in LA, did not like having like a couple of months where I was like, well, okay, I just figure out how to stretch that out.
I can't imagine you can do too much. It's probably pretty expensive, everything out there, isn't it?
Yeah. Because and again, like I said, we bought this house like right before everything crashed in like 2008, so we weren't able to sell it when we moved out there, and so I kind of rented it out to a friend for less than what like I could have got, like just renting it out to a stranger. But I was like, I don't know when we're coming back, right. So we had this place, and it's a 3-bedroom, 2-car, and the mortgage at the time was like $950, and we found what we were told was an awesome deal. It was a 400 square foot apartment, and it was $1,000 a month.
Really?
And we were in that apartment for 4 years, and when we moved, they replaced the countertops and put in fake hardwood floors, and they jacked the price up to $1,700.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the big thing, was like the food, all the other costs, that was the same or even cheaper. But housing was ridiculous. And the gas was always $1 more expensive. And if I had family coming out, like trying to cause in Missouri, if it's a mile, it's a minute, on the highway, you basically figure. And out there, like on the map, it would show it was like 12 miles away. And I was like, okay, that's going to be
45 minutes.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. And they're like, no. I'm like, no, seriously. The Look Effects first studio I worked at we lived in Sherman Oaks, just really close to the 101 in Ventura, where we could get on the 405 and just drive pretty straight down. Like I took 2 turns to get to where I was going. It was 12.5 miles, and it took me an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And
we lived in Dallas, Texas, and it was the same
yeah.
exact
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, we lived, I think it was like 12, 13 miles from like where my wife went to work, and she spent 3 to 4 hours on the road every day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah.
So, but everything else I loved about LA, especially being a movie nerd, because it's just like, it's like constant magic. Like every couple of weeks, you'd see somebody in the grocery store that you recognize for something. Or
who was the coolest person that you saw?
Oh man, I mean, I'm a nerd, so my level of cool is way different. But like, you know, we knew that we were only going to be out there for a limited time, because we were going to move back when we had kids, and so we were just taking advantage of it, all the free time we had. So,
did you kind of treat it as a vacation then?
Kind of. I mean, it was seriously like if I was on Twitter and I saw a celebrity who's like, "Hey, I'm doing this book signing at such and such." Well, if I had a lunch break or something, I was there, man. Like one of the more surreal things was, well, I think the first day I was out there, I went to In-N-Out Burger, and Darth Maul was like in line. The dude that played
Ray
Park.
Yeah.
And then like next week, Chris Knight, the guy that played Newman in Jurassic Park, was walking up the aisle. But then we went to church out there and was there for 2 months. It was good congregation, all that. And after about 2 months, one day Weird Al sits down next to me. Come to find out that's just his church, you know, and we'd started going there when he was on tour. But when he's in town, he was there, and it was a little 80-person church. So I got to talk to Weird Al every Sunday.
Really?
I mean, and he's like, again, I'm a nerd. So he's like my number one musician. So the first time he sits down, my wife pokes me in the side and goes, "You keep it cool." And I did, you know.
That's awesome. That is, you know, that's kind of one of those things that would be surreal.
Yeah, I mean,
is to be sitting in church and go, yeah, you know, I went to church with Weird Al.
Well, it's funny too, because like you're sitting there singing, and he would pick just random, like if he's singing tenor or bass or whatever, he'd change it up. He's just playing, he's keeping it interesting for himself. But went to the movie theater there in Sherman Oaks, and like was walking and talking to Rachel, and bumped elbows with this old guy, and apologized, and he apologized, and was like, "That sounded like Captain Kirk," and turned around, and I just bumped into
William
Shatner, and like the most surreal day. Was we went to church, so Weird Al was there, and then we were going to go see Goonies at the Egyptian, which is old Hollywood theater. And they just said there was going to be some of the cast there, and went in to see that. And apparently the movie it just played was Coraline. And so Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer were in the lobby talking to fans and like signing autographs. And again, this is small. I don't understand why these things weren't just packed full of people, but he looks up and sees me, and I wave at him because I'm like, that's Neil Gaiman right there. And he just waves back, and I go in there, and we watched the Goonies, and then it was Chunk and Mouth, and then the older Fratelli brother that were the cast that showed up.
Robert, is it Robert? I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And so then again,
I met Sean Astin.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
See, he's on my list. But it was like, and again, it was a small thing. It was like 50 people. And so they just like mingled for the next like 2 hours after the movie, just talking to people. So I got to talk to Chunk, and I'm blanking on Mouth's real name. And I know
Corey,
Feldman.
Feldman? Yeah.
Or Haim?
It's Haim.
Yeah, it's Haim.
Feldman is the other one.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And I always do that. But at any rate, so we did that. And then I had a buddy that texted me, and the buddy, he like knows all the VO guys from out there, and like, and he's like, "You're into nerd stuff, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "There's a garage sale over here in Burbank that had a bunch of nerd stuff I thought you might be into." And so I went over there, and there's comic books and stuff like that, and I'm going through it, and this lady comes over and it's like, "Well, if you want him to sign anything, just let him know. We got some more stuff inside." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I have no clue. Whose house is this?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm Mrs. Denny. This is Paul Denny's house," which again, nerd. Paul Denny's the guy that created Batman, the animated series in the 90s, created Harley Quinn and a bunch of these big Batman villains, and basically ran, maybe still does, most of the DC's like animation wing. And he was just clearing out like his storage shed and selling stuff as a garage sale. And he'd sign. I had like a Pez dispenser, a couple other things that he just came out and signed and chatted. And he's like, "I got a buddy down the street that's having a garage sale too. And he's an animation guy if you want to go down there." And so we drove, and we passed a couple walking, and I was like, that was Will Wheaton and his wife again, Star Trek and Stand By Me. And then we get to the other garage sale, and this one of the big animators that had been working at Disney for 40 years. And so I got to talk with him for like an hour because there was nobody at this dude's garage sale. And so it's like this whole day of like these weird, like, this is magic. Like this doesn't happen.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right?
And again, like it always blew me away whenever I would have some friends that I'd work with that are like, how do you see these people? How do you do these things? And I'd start talking to them like, well, they go to work. They have like their bar or the whatever right in there. And one of them, she'd lived there for 2 years before she saw her first celebrity. I'm like, I'm literally bumping into them. Like, how?
But maybe she didn't know they were celebrities.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, again, a lot of the people that I saw were not like the headlining actors or actresses. It was the
you're not going to run into George Clooney or somebody.
No. It was John Stamos, like in the produce aisle. Yeah.
So where is the industry going, in your opinion? Special effects, video effects. I mean, is it now kind of a fixture in that you will be working on just about every type of film there is out there to go in and like remove stuff or to enhance the video? I mean, is that kind of where all this goes?
It's hard to say because I mean, I have no idea what kind of new technology is coming out, but like every time some of it does, and I'm a little worried about like how this is going to affect me. Then I actually watch it and I'm like, oh, no, I'm fine. It's okay. I mean, age is going to get me way before I'm like outpaced by any of the tech. I saw a pie chart that said in the visual effects industry, it's like 75% of the industry's ages 20 to 30. And then it just keeps getting smaller. So by the time you hit 40, it's like 40 to 45 makes up like 3% of the industry.
Really?
And then after that, it's basically you're a studio owner. Like you're not doing any of the actual work. You're managing stuff.
Because you're just worn out from it?
Well, yeah. 'Cause again, there's no unions to argue for us and keep the hours sane. And like there was one studio that I worked at where we were working, like I said, 6-7 days a week, 16-hour days. Like there was the 3 a.m. Red Bull and Krispy Kreme cart that would go around.
So they were
get you going to get you through till dawn.
To get you going.
But I mean, there was a couple. My average work week was 84 hours during that year, and then I hit 110 hours one week, and that's like it was basically like coming down to like you showered or you slept. You really didn't get a lot of both.
So do they contract you out and give you like a base salary for that contract? So they can work you as many hours as they want then.
Yeah. And like they push that like, okay, we worked 16 hours, 8 hours, you have to be back, but we're legally obligated to send you home for 8 hours. Well, you get an hour drive to and from.
Right.
You're not sleeping those 8 hours.
Yeah, you spend time with your family as much time as you can.
And so like this one studio, there was a hotel nearby that they just had an account with them. So you could walk over there and rent a room so you could make sure you actually got a couple hours of sleep. And I mean, it's a rough industry. That's why there's no the older folks working there. And there was, I mean, and if they did, there was a couple of them that thought they were having heart attacks in that same studio because they were jacked up on Red Bull and like no sleep, and it was panic attacks or, but it's a hard industry. It's really easy. Well, not easy, but it's better if you're younger and you don't have a lot of family. And so that was it. I mean, as soon as I was going to say we got pregnant, but I had very little to do with that. As soon as Rachel was pregnant, we're like, okay, it's getting time to move back to Missouri because I will never see my child, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And that was it. She was born in September, and they moved back in December. And I was getting home at 3 a.m. and holding Persephone while I dozed, basically. And then Rachel would get up at 6, and I'd get up at 8, and that was it. And I know that's how a lot of them live that did have kids, or by the time they really get into it, their kids were older. So it was a little easier, but there's no way I would just never see family.
It makes a big difference in your decision making process.
Oh, for sure, 100%.
And if it doesn't, it's just like it. And I've even noticed it with myself probably in the last year. You start looking, and that was probably one of the best parts of the pandemic is getting myself to the point where I actually stopped and said, wow, I missed out on all of that because I've been working for the last decade.
100%.
And you definitely stop and reassess and move on.
And even like here where I was able to spend some more time, I was basically trying to run my own studio and get clients and stuff like that. And when I didn't have work, again, I don't idle well, so I was spending all my time with demo reel and website and sending out emails and stuff. But I realized it was like, but when I was just getting into having a decent client base and was getting a lot of hours, was right about, our youngest was 1 and Persephone was 3-ish. And so there's like a 1.5 year, 2 year period where my memory is really fuzzy. Because I was watching the girls all day, and then Rachel would get home and we have some family time. They'd go to bed, and then I'd stay up till 4 working. And so there was about a 2 year period where my average night was 3.5, 4 hours sleep here, just get done. And I was like, I started thinking about it, especially now that Persephone started kindergarten this last year in the pandemic, where it was all family time, which was awesome. And I was like, man, I don't have a lot of memories from that time. And so it definitely slowed down, even at this pace, made me go, okay, I got to slow down and focus even more on time with the fam.
I was actually talking with a buddy of mine this weekend about it, is that what the pandemic did for me was it gave me a preview of what I missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then now my decision-making process forward goes back and looks at that and says, okay, do I want to go that deep into that, filming all the time? You spend, of course, like with me, I spend just as much time packing up gear, loading gear up, going out to the shooting, coming back, editing till, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to hit the deadline by 8 a.m. the next morning, sleep for a couple hours, have a couple hours with the kids, have a couple hours with the wife, and then go back to doing the same thing all over again. And it really does, cramming that much stuff into your life, you're not going to remember anything.
No.
It's a very double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's rough because that's the same. If I'm working on stuff here that's not visual effects, I'm usually hired on as a production designer or some art department or something like that. And so it's that same sort of deal where it's like I'm packing the van full of all the props that I need the next day, and it's a 10-hour shoot. And that was right around the time, the wait when I got to work with Sam was right around when Persephone was getting ready to walk. And so it was like I missed out on the first steps at a couple. I was like, oh, man. So, yeah. But on the other hand, having kids, I am way more productive now because I know how precious every minute is. And so, I've got projects that I didn't even realize it had been 10 years since I had touched. But then once I had kids, it's like, oh, man, she's like 8 inches taller. I got to finish something, because you realize you have a walking metric to tell you how long time has been. So I've definitely got to where I get so much more done with way less time, and it's better quality too because I'm focused.
It's funny, I remember when we, before we had kids, you always talk about how much time we didn't have and all that kind of stuff, or how much money we didn't have.
Yeah.
And then you hear all the people that do have kids, and they're like, oh, you have no idea. And you're like, shut up. You have no idea. And then all of a sudden you have kids and you start listening to like those 20 somethings that go, oh my gosh, I didn't have time to get that done. And you're like, you have no concept of what time is. Yeah. Kids are the great equalizer in like what time is. You definitely see that progression of time so much more. It's more poignant than than just getting up playing Call of Duty for however many hours and watching 6 movies and then going, oh, I ran out of time today.
Yeah. No, and I've played that same game where it's like I felt like I had zero time in college because I was working a job, I was doing my classes and all that. And then now I think about it, I was like, I had naps. Like I had regular naps. Like I had time. It was just wasn't and those little bits that fall in between the couch cushions and stuff like that you just don't keep track of. Where now man, you know where your 15 minutes is.
Oh yeah. You become a very good accountant of all those things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I started wearing a wristwatch. It's like, you got to keep on it.
That is totally outside of being an artist though, right?
Oh yeah. Cause no. I mean, being the dumb art kid in college, I was like, I'm not going to wear a watch. I don't need to worry about time. That's not a thing. And then you start getting into professionalism, especially again as a kid. I'm like, I got to keep a watch on all the time.
Now, something I want to talk about because, and I want to go through this. You and I talked last week about the possibility of there's a couple films that you have out there, and it's come up on the podcast a couple times.
Yeah, Mr. Mickey Stone.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to like where those are in the realm of being able to show them.
There's a lot of answers to that question.
Yeah. Because you have two, right?
Yeah.
There's two.
Yes. I think there's just two. Whenever I got out of college, the plan was to do a movie every 2 years, a different genre. And so, and again, it's kind of like as an artist, you're supposed to like do master studies. And so you can kind of find your own place. And so I thought if I did a genre film, by the time I got 4 genres in, I would really know my stuff.
What your niche was.
Yeah. And everybody's first movie should be a horror movie, obviously, as Sam Raimi and so many others have told us. And I'm a big horror nerd. And they're cheap, you know. And so I got out of college. I was working nights at Walmart for like 6 months, and I lucked into getting on a TV station. It's really hard to not say that I have been blessed in a lot of how my career has gone. Because again, the dude, it's like, Muppets, and then that's how I landed. Like, that should not have happened. Like, and getting into this TV studio where it was Springfield 33, I got on as a graphic designer. The week that I got hired, the creative director got fired. And so everybody that was there moved up. I'm low man on the totem pole, but it meant that they still had a space that they were filling in with an intern. Then 3 weeks later, the producer left on maternity leave. And then 3 weeks after that, the guy that became the new creative director that was the photog editor quit because he hated dealing with the salespeople. And so all of a sudden, it's me and 2 interns running this department.
Oh, wow.
Within like 3 months. And I was trying to learn as much as I could. So I'd spent that time talking to everybody, talking to salespeople, and how can we communicate easier, and how do we do this? And so within 3 months, I was made creative director of the TV studio's whole marketing and commercial thing. And so, that was definitely, you figured stuff out fast.
Right. But you know what, to me, that's not dumb luck though. That's being, opportunistic and preparing yourself for those opportunities.
Yeah.
And because if you don't do that, if you didn't have the background or the knowledge beforehand, something like that would have came up and you probably would have been like, I quit.
Yeah.
And you rose to the occasion. And so,
But at any rate, it put me in a place where I was running the department, and I had been working on the scripts while I was working nights at Walmart. I was taking notes and stuff like that. And I had access to some gear, and I wasn't going to do it all on their gear. Again, this is kind of dating the time, but I got a loan from my mom and bought the best prosumer camera at the time, which was a Canon XL2, standard def, mini DV tapes. And I got some audio gear, and then borrowed monitors and stuff from the TV station whenever there wasn't anything shooting, and got in with a bunch of the MSU kids that thankfully the one guy that showed up for my audition for the actors was huge into horror movies and special effects, Nathan Shelton, who and so he's like, I got all these friends. And so he invited all of his friends to audition for me. And so we spent spring break shooting this horror movie out there. And it was 2005, 2006, I think. But it was just being in the place where I had the gear, and it was amazing time. Like, one of the best experiences of my life, is spending 6 days out in the middle of nowhere shooting in this, that they were going to burn down the house after we were done shooting it, because he just wanted it off his land. He said he did not care what
Really?
we did to it. It was like, it's out past Rogersville. It was kind of like just past like this Amish community. And so like the whole 6 days we were there was like 2 cars that went by and 3 buggies.
Really?
And I mean, it was out there. No cell phone reception. If you wanted a real bathroom, you had to drive up to the McDonald's. But again, amazing time. And it happened that I have a cousin that does pyrotechnics. And I called him. I was like, can you blow up a van? He's like, can I? And he's like, but you have to call the local fire marshal to get them to sign off on it. So I called the local fire department. Like, we really don't have anything like that, but can we come out and watch? I'm like, can you come out with fire trucks? And I'm like, oh yeah, we'll turn it into a training deal. And so like that was the last day of this horror movie shoot, was having my cousin's pyrotechnics team blow up a van, and then the fire department comes in and puts it out. And so, I mean, it built ego way too fast, because creative director after 3 months, shooting my first horror movie, and like at the end of it, I have a crew of over 70 people that are listening to me.
Oh, wow.
And it was way too much ego for the time, because I'm right there. I was just like, yeah, got this next one that I'm going to do. And man, life is just not going to keep me down. Life's not going to, because that was the big thing. I talked to these other people that were like, had dropped their dreams, and what happened? Life got in the way. And I'm like, life's never going to get in the way for me. And then like Morgan Freeman's voice comes in and says, life most certainly got in the way. Because like I started editing.
It is so funny you say that, because when you think of your life as a movie, right, and you envision this scene of you kind of sitting there and you're like really at it, and then there's a freeze frame and it slowly zooms in, and then Morgan Freeman's voice comes over. Yeah, this is where it all went.
Oh yeah, 100% too. Because that was like, because I started editing and I was using one of the work computers, and the file corrupted. I was like, I had to back up, so I wasn't worried about it, but the backup was also corrupted. So I had to start editing the movie again. This is after putting like a month into it. And then another month in, and this time I was backing it up on a different drive and was, checking everything. And then there was a short or lightning hit the studio or something, and it just burned out the whole computer, and it killed both drives. And they weren't able to recover the footage. And so this is like, I'd put in like 2 months of edit on this, and I was like, oh man, kind of killing the steam. And then all these wonderful, beautiful actors that had worked with me and said, we will do any movie that you want us to do. Then they're like, yeah, man, we just graduated, so we're all moving to California here in a couple of months. I'm like, okay. And so I'd already started like drafting out my film noir, which is my second movie. And I was just trying to get it, like literally my timeline was just when each actor moved to California on having each of their scenes shot. And so suddenly I had 2 movies in the course of like a year that were both in some stage of edit, and like zero drive to still do it, because it just felt like everything had just been slapped around. And then again, life getting in the way. I bought the house, because that's what grown-ups do when they have a good job. And then the market kind of dropped. So I knew I was going to resell it fairly soon and move out to California myself, but I won't be selling the house anytime soon. But it's okay. I still got a good job. And then KY3 bought out Springfield 33 and fired all the management and all the creative team, because they didn't want entrenched management causing conflicts. Exactly. And they already had, and so suddenly I didn't have any work, and the economy collapsed. And so nobody was really hiring, and everybody's commercial budgets dropped. And so I took like 2 or 3 clients with me that I was doing their work for. It was just enough to pay the bills and kind of keep going. But then, so I was like, I went from being like, yeah, I can do anything,
and then to 10 years passes, 15 years passes.
Yeah. And so, this was 2005. And I went back like here and again and edited the horror movie. And each time I did, I like cut chunks out of it. Cause like the serial killer rant at the end was like originally like 10 minutes long, and it was beautiful. Like our actor, Tyler, he nailed it. But I was like, no, I got to cut this down. And so it went from like 10 minutes down to like, I think it's 4 minutes at this point. But it's just like every time I'd go in, I'd retighten it. And I had built all this backstory and all this stuff that I was like, I just felt like really was show the psychology of the serial killer. And then I like watch it again after having not touched it for a year and go, yeah, nobody's going to care about this.
Really?
So just start tightening and tightening and tightening. So the edit on the horror movie, I think it's done. I haven't looked at it honestly in like 8 years at this 6 years at this point. And
has anybody else seen it?
No, I think I've showed bits to my wife, and she is not a horror movie person. She's like, okay.
Really?
And that was it. And I mean, again, it was my first film effort, so we're not expecting a lot of,
right.
And again, there was a lot of my actors that, I mean, I have no problem with curse words anyway, and especially in horror movies, it felt accurate for my characters. I wasn't just throwing it in there to throwing them in. But I had a lot of actors that if they couldn't remember their lines, they'd use the F-bomb as kind of like a way to build up speed.
Right.
So they'd drop like 10 of those and then pop into the lines. And so like I edited out as many F-bombs as I could that didn't make sense, but there was still a lot. So Rachel's just like, okay. So and
what's the name of that one?
That is, technically it's homage, because my whole deal was putting in horror movie references throughout, not like hit you over the head, but like we made sure there was an Elm Street sign in the background and stuff. And, like the characters were like Hazel, who was a witch, and Hyde, who has a duplicitous nature and stuff like that. And it doesn't hit you over the head with it, but it's still there. So it was homage, Darkness in the Lord's Prayer, because when I was writing the script, that Darkness in the Lord's Prayer was the first thing that I wrote down, and I like how that sounds.
Right.
So yeah, it's all edited. The sound scares me a little bit because I did what I could, but like we had a generator to shoot everything on, and at the time we couldn't hear it. Because you were out in the
middle of nowhere.
Yeah. But then like working on it in the headphones, like I can hear that put.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, oh man. So I've got to get a cutaway to show them actually having a generator on their property to work it into the story. And the van that we drove, like I bought it from some family of mine, and it worked fine. Like they brought it in and it drove fine. I could not get the thing to run. My actors couldn't get the thing to run. And so I hooked it to the back of my pickup truck with a chain and was driving it through Springfield to get the shots that we wanted. And the actor was driving it for all this one car scene. He had the clutch down and everything, but you could still hear some stuff grinding little bit. And it's like to the point where like we're driving up and down like Sunshine and Grand and stuff on just right around College area. And I'm looking in my rear view because I'm listening to everything going on in the headphones while I'm driving my pickup and dragging it around. And I look in the rear view, and I was used to seeing my tail lights reflecting in the grill of the van. And then I realized that the light's coming from the other side of the grill, and that there's a fire inside, and all my actors and crew are inside this van. Oh. And so like I stop it, and I'm like, everybody out. And in the tape, you can hear one of the actors going, "What's wrong with Darrell? Why is he yelling at us?" And it was because like there was enough friction, and this thing was old enough with some old oil. It just, the whole engine like caught on fire. And so we're sitting there with like our water bottles and stuff, like trying to put it out. And we sent all the actors home except for Tyler and Nathan. And the next day we had to have that thing out at the farm. And so we took like a 2 a.m. drive with a chain in this pickup truck from downtown Springfield out to Fordland. Really? It was raining, and like he had kind of steering and kind of a brake, but like we were like a semi truck tries to like merge, and I change lanes, but it's like a delayed reaction of like 8 seconds for that van to come over behind it, and they're both in the van just freaking out the entire time. So awesome stuff, like lots of good memories. I want to get it edited, but so there's all the sound issues on there too. And I had a ton of visual effects stuff planned for it. And as one of them pointed out, that's going to be way better now because I actually know more of what I'm doing as an artist, where I didn't then. So then the film noir, I was trying to edit those scenes as I shot them. So I knew that I had all my coverage and stuff like that. And so the scenes are mostly edited, but it's not like edited together into one cohesive thing. And one thing that I realized while working on that was I feel like I'm awesome at characters. I'm not great at structure. And so just even as I was like editing this thing together, I was like, I think this scene totally needs to go 3 scenes later than where I have it, because it's just not being very effective here. And so there's a lot of I honestly couldn't tell you where that movie is, because there was so much of that where I was just kind of switching stuff around to make it play better that I could see once it was all laid out. And there may be 2 scenes that I just never got edited because, again, lost my job, looking for work, and it was like, it's one of those things where it just felt like, and I got into the video game studio, which was another situation where I was working like 90-hour weeks, and there was just no time for any of that stuff. So it always seemed like when I had time to work on my personal projects, it was because I was out of work and I needed to be looking for jobs. And so, and again, it just, wow, 10 years? Really? Yeah. That's amazing, you know? And so, yeah, it's been 15 years and 13 years or 14-ish years for those 2. And I still got them. You
need to let them out.
I know I do. I think about it quite, and my mom, because since she loaned me the money for all that camera gear and stuff, but she's like, I don't even like horror movies. You need to get that thing done just so you don't have it on your conscience anymore.
How much did she loan you?
It was $10,000.
She loaned you $10,000 for it?
And I paid it. I paid back like as time went. Yeah. But that was the camera, which at the time was like $4,000, you know?
Right.
And the audio gear and some lenses and stuff like that. And the funny thing is, it's like my phone has better resolution than that XL2 does now. And I honestly, I've not bought another camcorder of any form since then, because it's like, for what I do, if I want to do my own projects, I've got a little Canon Rebel that I use to get footage, and that's more than enough.
And they look great.
Yeah, because I mean, and I know how to fiddle with footage, and at this point, that is one thing that there is no Hollywood standard. Like, you'd be amazed at the size of some of these productions and the crap footage that they will hand you, that you're just like, well, okay,
let's make it look good.
Yeah, exactly. And so at this point, I am so casual about whatever footage somebody hands me that I'm fine with my little
That's
Canon.
really good to know. That's really good to know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that I think as filmmakers, especially like indie guys, we build up so much. It's like, well, it's not a Hollywood thing, but man, I've been on Hollywood stuff. I've seen what they put out. The difference is talent, and if you can hire somebody, or if you've got a buddy that can do it just as well.
Well, and you know, a lot of it too is how much heart you want to put in that stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, there are people out there that they put everything they can into it, and you can tell that they did, and they loved what they were doing, and they had a great time doing it.
Yep.
And it does make a big, I just got done doing the peer reviews on all the Sato films.
Oh, sure.
And I would say there were some diamonds in the rough, mm-hmm. and there were some that you could tell they had a lot of fun making the film.
Right.
98% of all the problems that I saw in all the Sato films were the edit.
Yeah.
The edit is where everyone got killed.
Yeah.
They couldn't tell their story because they cut to here or they cut to there, but that could be because they didn't have the footage, right?
Yeah.
But the edit is the art form of a film. Yeah. It is that you can have the best shot and the best performance, but if that editor comes in there and picks a really bad performance, or picks a really bad shot, then it's kind of over with.
For sure. And they can take a mediocre performance and punch it up because they can play with that timing.
Because of the way that the timing is.
Yeah.
And so, and that's something that, like, at this point with your film, it's all in the edit now, right?
Yeah.
You really can't go back and do.
Oh no! I mean, like I said, I've got a couple cutaways that I want to get where it's going to be. I mean, it could just be a still that I animate and put some shadows across it so it looks like footage. But all of us actors are, 15 years older and different weights and less hair. And I mean,
ooh, you could do that. Like, have one of them that comes back and talks about it,
sitting around the campfire.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Lead in.
Well, so. To give you a little bit of lead up on what we were talking about here, so there's this showcase that I'm looking at doing, and I've talked with Darrell about this last week, but there's a showcase that I'm looking at doing, and I'd love to get out some of these films to see where some of us who are very good at what we do now I'd love to see where we started from. I think it's important. It's a confidence boost. It's a learning experience. And for me, I think it would just be awesome because this has been floating around. I've heard it. I've talked to quite a few people, and they've talked about Darrell Claunch's first films that he did, and I would love to at least be able to see one of them. And so my hope is once we get the festival going in full speed, then all of a sudden you're going to go, all right, Tom, let's do this. And maybe we can bring in some of those the old actors now, the 15-year older actors in to come in and talk about.
There's definitely a couple of them we could pull in, but yeah, it'd be interesting.
Was Mickey in the first one?
No, he was. I met Mickey while I was at the TV studio because he's a voiceover artist originally,
right?
And it was just we were talking movies all the time when he'd come in, and I was like, I think it was actually Mike Strain. He had a film festival at the time, and he wanted a trailer for it because he'd helped out a little bit with the horror movie, and so I threw together a quick trailer.
So there is a trailer that was released for it.
It was so bad, and it makes no sense really based on what the story was. But Mickey voiced the trailer for that, and then he's like, "Hey, if you do anything else," and so for the next one, I had the corrupt senator who needed a couple of heavies. And man, Mickey can play a heavy like nobody's business.
Yeah, he can.
And so he was my main guy for that. And then, I mean, pretty much any movie that I worked on, I made sure he was in there somewhere. And I mean, he is Mr. Springfield as far as I mean, and that was part of it. Like when we spoke last week, Mickey and I've had a lot of conversations where there's an easy 85% of the movies that he has worked on in this town that has never been finished for a variety of reasons.
Well, it's funny you say that because after I talked with you last week on the phone, I called Mickey up because Mickey has a film that he hasn't released.
He has a couple.
Yeah, that I guess he's produced, directed.
One of those is partially to blame on me as well.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Because the
Consequentia.
Rain in Hell he shot just a little bit before we moved to LA, and it was a gangster movie, and it just again took me a while to get it together, and then the word you just said is kind of like it was basically him going, this other movie's old enough now, I don't know how well it'll play, so he's going to use the footage from that movie to fill in backstory for his current characters,
right? And
I don't know where the current film is, but I know that the other one I did finish. So
when I talked to Mickey, Mickey's cool with let's try to put that one out possibly as well too. Yeah. And then we have another film. I don't know if you've ever heard of the film The Black Mariachi.
I've heard the title because you can't forget that title.
That's been floating around for a while, and I think that one might be played at this too. Nice. So we're gonna have. If we can get this thing going, which I'm really excited about, if we can get this thing going, we may have 3 to 4 premieres of films that have never seen the light of day. They've only lived on a hard drive, and we're going to get to screen them and watch them and then talk to the directors and talk about the process and all that, which I think would be a ton of fun.
As long as the director's not reduced to a ball of tears by the time they see that.
We'll bring Kleenexes. Yeah. But I talked to Mickey. I want to give him an award for being the actor of Springfield that has the most movies that have never been released.
Yeah.
He's got the most movies in general, but he's got a ton that have never been released.
Yeah, it's insane.
And he's got some great stories with some of them.
Yeah.
That were fun to listen to.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So what's next for you? What do you got in the hopper?
Again, it's hard to say. That's kind of our business is I never know really 3 weeks from now what's going on or how it's going to go. And that was one of the things. Success looks very different when you're in the middle of it than what you think it's going to.
It's kind of like a frog in boiling water.
Yeah. Because that was like when we moved out to LA and was doing all this stuff, it was just about paying the bills. And even coming back, it's just like, just got to pay the mortgage and stuff like that. And we were in LA for about 4 or 5 years, and we moved back, and Mickey was like, you're one of the guys that, had a plan and they succeeded. I was like, did I really have a plan? And then I thought about it, and I was like, I guess we did say that we were going to move out to LA and then get the network and the connections that we needed to be able to do what we want when we moved back to Springfield. I guess that's what I'm doing. Really doesn't feel like that's what I really thought success would mean more money in the bank.
You thought it would look different.
Yeah, completely different. And again, like you said, the IMDb thing, like it grows, but it's just me trying to keep busy and pay the bills. And so this and last year was such a weird year because again, everything was shut down. So it was the first time it was like, where normally if I don't have work, I'm really kind of freaking out and a little paranoid, but I was like, there's no work to be had. Like I can completely just chill and take time with the fam and think about my own stuff. But this year it feels like stuff's trying to catch up a little bit. Yeah. So it's been pretty busy, and it kind of feels like I've had at least one studio tell me that when they get this next batch of stuff in, they have enough to keep me on for the full year, which like never happens. And it maybe won't happen, but you know, it's still nice that that's a possibility. But right now I'm working on it's mainly TV shows. That was the big change moving back to Springfield. Is like in LA, it's a lot more. It's all closer, and so all the Disney movies they'll stay in LA for and so it's been mainly smaller stuff like The Purge and a couple of like the Conjuring sorts of movies and stuff since I moved back here, and then TV shows. And so right now the stuff I'm working on is a show called Hacks, which has Jean Smart, which is the blonde gal from Designing Women. Oh, she's been in a ton of stuff since then, but my mind's stuck in the 80s. So, and that's been kind of interesting because I've been working on one of the show openers. So instead of just like a narrative kind of structure, which is what I'm good at, it's definitely a little bit more, not music video-y, but not, and it's a different mindset. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm completely visuals, and I'm good with the narrative, and that's how my head works. And so it's easy to wrap around that. But then I also just started working on the Foundation series, and again, I don't know what station that may be, Stars or HBO, but it's based on Isaac Asimov's sci-fi trilogy, the Foundation series, which I'm excited about because my dad's favorite book series.
Oh, really?
And so it's
I've never heard of it. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's fun to get to play with that, and it comes down to it like some of this stuff is just a job. I work on it with just as much zeal and enjoyment as anything else, but it's cool to when you get to kind of touch some of the stuff that you're super nerdy about. Like I was super excited to get to work on Star Trek, and I worked on the reboot for Ninja Turtles, and the Muppets. A lot of childhood in Jurassic Park. Man, I tried for years. I would send out emails to the guys over in London that did the special effects for Doctor Who, just because I wanted to be able to say I worked on Doctor Who, but they only hire British folks. But I mean, so it's cool. It's cool in this job that I get to play with stuff that like is legit passions of mine. Sure. Outside of just working in movies.
Just a couple questions just came up. So when you get a section of a movie or a TV show to work on, are they giving you like just certain sections of it and saying
it's shots?
You're just working on a shot.
A shot, and there's no audio. Everything we do is in frames.
Okay.
So like we were working on some of the Marvel movies, and it was all super hush hush, secret, and we're like, we don't know what's going on. Like we were excited that we saw Thanos.
Right.
But we had no idea how he played into it because there's no audio.
So you got the shot with Thanos already in it.
Yeah.
And then you were making changes to
just
whatever.
Clean up or this or that. So,
really?
However it works out, whatever lands on your plate. I mean, sometimes it could be just like I had a bunch of shots for one scene from Captain America and the Winter Soldier, which with Scarlett Johansson in it. And it was just, they'd had a long night filming the night before. And one thing with higher resolution this stuff gets, the less you can put makeup on to hide the bags under the eyes. And so it was just, went through a scene just lightening the spots under her eyes because she'd been
up all night.
Yep. And I mean, and that's
And Scarlett Johansson is beautiful enough, with bags under her eyes. Yeah.
There's so much of my work that has been done. It's called beauty work, and it's like, well, okay, guys, but 90% of what I do is invisible effects. It's not the explosions. It's not aliens. It's removing the grip. It's removing gear, and it's doing stuff that you can't do with makeup anymore. And I worked on maybe 4 seasons of the TV show Nashville, all beautiful Hayden Panettiere, and it was removing zits and lightening up bags under the eyes, and just some slight cleanup. And there was I don't even know if it lasted more than a season. It was a series about Zelda Fitzgerald that had Christina Ricci, which again, 80s kid. I was like, she's beautiful, but they were having us lighten the creases like where her smile was. And I mean, like her smile, those cheeks are like such a part of and they were like having me downplay it because the lighting was just a little harsh in the shadows and stuff like that. And again, Scarlett, and there's been a couple others where it's like, I mean, my girls have zero illusions about how much is manipulated.
Can you see it when you watch?
100%.
All the time now? Yeah. So is it all the time on a lot of stuff?
Oh, and even to the point where there is a program out there that they use sometimes on the red carpet that
will work on live footage.
Live footage, yeah. Smoothing out some wrinkles and stuff like that.
I see it a lot on necks. That's where I can pick it up, is right below the chin line and on the neck where they get rid of the creases on... or it's mostly on females, but when they
pick up a shadow or something weird, depending on how they lit it that day.
Doing Photoshop for 20 years, I can look at it and go, yeah, they totally they used a little too much smoothing on that one.
And magazine covers and stuff like that. That's the worst, because there's some of that stuff. It's like that's not even anatomically possible. Her ribs cannot move like that. But yeah, I mean it's one of those things where it could easily, and it's any aspect of production, but it could take you out of being able to enjoy a movie because you're seeing all that stuff, but you kind of get good at shutting it off too. But yeah, beauty work is one of those things that I mean, it happens with guys too. It's just in their contracts. It says like there was one well-known actor that I came into a studio after they finished a movie with him in it, and I won't say because he had a lot of contracts. I couldn't say it, but they were strengthening his jawline, removing neck waddle a little bit, and filling in some hair. And,
really?
And they like, yeah, this is what we did on that show. And I'm like, that, especially at the time, I would have had no idea. And it's some ridiculous stuff too, like I said, beauty work on beautiful people, and some of it, like there was was it Superman Returns, the one with Brandon Routh? Yeah, there was a digital package team who were minimizing how his bulge looked in the.
They were minimizing it,
yeah, because they were some of the directors and stuff and they did the same thing with like a couple Lindsay Lohan movies, where they downplayed her digitally afterwards because
really?
Like, this is a kid's movie. There's a little bit,
Wow.
And there was several like wardrobe malfunctions that I've digitally gone in and painted stuff out for stuff. And it's stuff you wouldn't think of, but
that's crazy.
It's all part of the job.
So do you have any projects that you're working on like locally? Anything that you're looking at doing locally? Do you got any films in your?
Not really. That was one of the things. Like when we moved to California and we came back, most of the film kids that we worked with had all moved on to other things,
Right.
And so a lot of the last like 5 years has been me trying to like figure out who's still doing stuff and kind of try to connect. And again, there's an age gap for a lot of it because it's a lot of 20-something and something like that, and I'm just about to hit 40. And
you poor baby.
I know, right? But it feels like a big gap,
right?
And so I try to kind of pay attention. And Mickey's an awesome one to know because he's in everything, and so I talk with him quite a bit, and he'll tell me, this guy is pretty good. And then one of the biggest rules I think in our industry is if you're good at something, you get paid for it. It's like when you start off, you always want to do stuff for free.
Sure.
And you really find out quickly that the stuff that you do for free is the stuff that will be the biggest pain in the butt. Like without fail, somebody will take advantage of you because your value to them is nothing, even though you're doing professional level work. And so I don't volunteer my services. I will give friend rates.
Right.
But I won't normally go, I want to do this for free.
I'm going to do it for free.
But I watched Brittany Greer's Strange Happenings, the web series that she put out. And I watched all the episodes and was really mad when there wasn't another episode. And so I literally just hopped over to Facebook and I met her 2 or 3 times.
Right.
And I was like, when is this getting done? She goes, well, we don't really. I'm like, no. It's like, I want to see this. I am volunteering visual effects stuff for free. Right. To help you in any way, in any of your projects. You are awesome.
Yeah.
I want to see more stuff out of you. So if I can help in any way,
that's awesome.
I'm gonna visual and
her Happy Halloween. I'm not 100% sure where it is on the.
Well, and that's the trailer looks awesome and all that stuff.
It does.
And so that's about the closest I've got to anything local is volunteering.
Yeah.
VFX on that. Otherwise, I'll have some folks ask me for some with Ducon Williams. I did some visual effects on one of his flicks.
Vincent's Vow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Shannon with
Chiro.
Yeah. With,
Nostalgia. You edited Nostalgia, didn't you?
Yeah, and I did some. I don't remember if I was actually brought on technically for visual effects, but it was just I was editing in After Effects.
Right.
And so it was I can throw fog on in 2 seconds for the shot, so why not?
What takes some of us probably hours, you can get done in minutes, and it looks better.
Well, yeah, it's just because I've done it, so many times. And I like editing quite a bit, so it was
you're one of the only people I know.
I actually made a note whenever I was listening to you and Sam's talk about that, and it cracks me up because I hated editing to begin with, but working commercials, I kind of got to where when I realized I could make, I could feel a flow, this weird rhythm through it. It was that just jazzed me up. And so since then, I love taking footage until I can just feel that
I love editing other people's stuff.
And that may be part of it.
I don't like editing my stuff, but I've gotten into this kind of rut where I edit my own stuff, and I've kind of gotten where I want to see what everybody else makes, and I like making something based off that. It just seems fun to me.
Well, and it gives you one less thing to worry about, because otherwise, if it's your stuff, then you're also thinking about, what that actor was doing or what else was going on.
Is that shot really good?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's the nice thing with editing somebody else's stuff is I have what I have.
Yeah.
Just go with it.
Let's make something with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very true.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. And I want to thank you, number one, for taking the time to talk with me about this.
I've been listening to him, so it's been cool.
But since I've met you, what was that? Almost 2 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
At that
Ozark Webfest.
Yeah, Webfest. Since I met you, I've told my kids multiple times, I was this guy worked on Thor, or is it Dark World, right?
It was so much hair fixing, and
really. But I told my kids, I was I know the guy that worked on the special effects on this, and they're like, oh wow, cool. Even though there was if you look on the list there at the end, there's 300,000 people.
Oh, for sure. And the funny thing is, again, with that whole union thing, there's nobody to argue how many names we get.
Right.
And so that's 30% of the people actually
Is it really?
Our studio in particular had 350 people, and I think we were given 50 names that we were able to put into the Marvel
So
movies.
that's why you have uncredited on some of yours on IMDb is because they can't put all of them on there.
It costs extra. The studio charges the VFX studio
crazy
out of it. Because it's because everything used to be on actual footage. And so if you had an extra 2 seconds of credits, that was an extra 2 feet of footage, and that would add up to $100,000 by the time you sent that reel out to all the.
Gosh.
But now everything's digital. It doesn't matter, but they still use that
same
in there. And so, like for Star Trek, that was one where I was like, I really want to be in these credits, but like we do everything at random. And I was like slipping some of the producers bottles of whiskey and stuff like that. I was like, no, you don't understand. I want to be, and like, no, it's random. And then when the movie came out, one of my buddies who actually had quit the studio 2 months before we started working on Star Trek, his name was in the credits because the guy that put the credits together had used an old credits list and just switched out some of them. And he ended, my buddy, I mean, it worked out well for him, but there was like 3 movies that came out and he was in the credits and he didn't even touch. I'm like, oh, man, are you kidding me? I just wanted Star Trek. But yeah, with visual effects, I mean, it seems like there's a ton, but unless it's the primary visual effects studio, you're probably only seeing maybe half of the actual
crazy
people that were working on it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's also, again, that union thing. That's also why we fall below the caterers. Like we're right before the music because there's nobody to argue for our place in the credits line.
Really?
And so that's why we're at the tail end.
So you've said this quite a few times. So you really do feel that the
You picked up on that.
the visual effects really need to be unionized like everybody else.
100%. I mean, obviously there's issues with unions. I won't argue that,
Right.
but I've seen way too many people literally work themselves into the hospital because the studio's like, well, if you don't like it, go work somewhere else.
So do you think that will in essence raise the price? That'll obviously raise the price of how much it costs to make a film, right?
You would think, but I mean, all of that stuff, there's so many ways around it. There's so many tax incentives, and they threatened to send it to Singapore and stuff like that. And Pune was one of the studios we had a sister studio at, but it was like sometimes those guys would have walkouts too. And so,
Right. And it doesn't necessarily, if you guys were to union in the United States, then they could technically send it.
but they do that already.
Right. They
And
do
so
it anyways.
It's like they're always going to look for, I mean, and this isn't just the movie business, this is any business. They're going to look for the cheapest way to do things.
Sure.
Regardless. And so it's basically coming down to like just setting up like a healthy work environment
Sure.
for them, and then having stuff again like arguing the place in line. But yeah, it's again, we're working on movies, so it's hard to complain about how it is. But it's kind of messed up sometimes. It was on The Life of Pi. I got to work on that a little bit, and it won an award for visual effects. And like Ang Lee like gets off stage, and he's like, "Yeah, it'd be nice if everything was a lot cheaper." And then like the company that did all the effects on it, Rhythm and Hughes, they went bankrupt like the week after that. Like, and that was one of the Rhythm and Hughes and Digital Domain were the two that I wanted to work at whenever I went out to LA, and they've both went bankrupt.
Because they have to employ so many people, right?
Like I said, they knocked that 30% off.
They've got such a quick turnaround that they want that stuff to be done.
Yeah, because we are at the tail end of the process.
Right.
So every time that somebody else has gone past their deadline, it eats into ours.
What is the triangle? If you want something cheap, then you're going to have to invest a lot of time and quality. Yeah, right.
It's
and there's that they call it the film triad.
Yeah, it's like cheap, good, or
cheap, good,
or quick, or something.
Or quick, yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, especially with digital, it's all kind of compressing. Because before you had to have time to like ship it out, but like with Star Trek, we were dropping in VFX shots 6 hours before the premiere in Australia because it was all digital. They just plug it in and download it and then boot it up. And so everything's just getting tighter and tighter and
that's
tighter.
not even counting for how much data is having to be stored at those those effects houses because they have to store all that stuff, right?
And back it up. And I mean, like, especially with everything getting higher and higher resolution. I always, I mean, even here working on TV shows, not even the big high end
filming
stuff.
Everything in 4K.
Yeah, and so it's like my average shot will be, and it's like, you know, a 2-second shot, it's 2 gigs, you know.
It's crazy.
And so, yeah, you multiply that plus all the versions, you know, if you go through 11 versions or whatever to get the shot where they want it, then that's all backed up someplace until the movie actually airs, and then they go through.
But Darrell, you don't understand. It's all easy.
Yeah.
It's all easy.
Yeah. You're working on movies, man. What are you complaining about?
Well, Darrell, thanks for being on here. I really, really appreciate it. And we're going to, once we get some things figured out here down the road, I want to get back in touch with you because we want to talk a little bit more about some of your other projects.
Sure.
Does that sound great?
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Well, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Bravo Creative Podcast. Analysis of your biometrics have been compiled and calculated. You are now a minuscule part of the collective. Enjoy the rest of your pitiful day.